Welcome, everyone. I'm Michelle Wilhite, and I've got Chris Somerville here tonight with me. We're going to be talking about lenders from a non-lender perspective. And Chris, you used to be a lender, right?
I did. Many years.
And I've never been a lender. I never want that job. So,
Rochelle, I'm gonna call you. I'm gonna call you for a loan after this call.
Yeah.
It depends on how
So some of you on the call, I think, are past lenders, so don't take offense. This is really meant to be a non-lender call. Let me see if Carly can step out for a minute. Hey, Carly, do you mind stepping for a minute? Yeah, sorry. We are going to cover the loan process a bit from a real estate agent perspective. I've got this really nice little checklist you guys can use, but I really want to just talk openly with Chris about working with a lender and what he's seen from his vantage point for the first 5 minutes of the call. Then we'll go through the loan process checklist, maybe cover some basics that you may not know if you're a newer broker to the industry. So just real quick, Chris, we can talk. We've talked about this before. It's nothing new. When you're working with a lender, what are some top tips that you would recommend? Again, you're seeing it from the title and escrow perspective, but what do you see most agents struggle with the most when it comes to working with a lender?
Well, and I just, as a little caveat to that, I was also a real estate agent for a couple of years too, because I've kind of run the whole gamut of being in all the different perspectives. So a little bit more uniquely qualified, I guess, in that area. So, I mean, when I'm looking at like the keys to the relationships with the lender, I mean, obviously communication, the understanding that everybody is just a direct extension of each other's business. I think that's really key. You know, making sure that you have some communication up front, making sure the availability is there and understanding and how to, you know, sync, you know, really, you know, having a really great relationship where you can synchronize with that other person, understand what the goals are and getting them pre-approved, you know, in advance of coming in or going out and looking at homes as it relates to buyers that are going to go out and look for something to purchase.
Okay, perfect. So I think you hit the nail on the head. The communication piece, I think, is what a lot of agents don't. Maybe they get going too fast, Chris. Like where they're out there talking about the sales and they're talking about what properties and what homes, and they forget that there's a missing component on getting that lender on the same team, right? And having a good communication before you actually start touring properties. They almost connect with the lender like when they're writing the offer, which is like, if you were a lender, if you were, I know you were in the past, you would much rather talk to that person, that broker, or that real estate agent before they go tour properties, right? That would be your ideal setting. Have that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, and that's just a simple, formula as far as like making sure that they're pre-qualified, that they're actually qualified to purchase a home before you're going to start, dedicating resources to that. I know that sometimes we get a little excited, we get an opportunity, especially if we're fairly new in the business. And what I would just say is like start beginning to build a relationship with a lender up front. And, I think with as a real estate agent, as a lender, as a title rep, being easy to do business with has got to be key to those relationships. So you've got to have somebody that's easy to do business with, understands how you work, and can work synergistically, converting, because it is about selling and it is about converting, because we'd like to use our preferred lenders if at all possible. And sometimes people come with other ideas, right? So,
right. So let's start from there, Chris. Let's just pretend like you are a lender that, well, actually, no, you're a client. Let's role play that part. So you're a client and you come with some other ideas. Let's kind of go down that rabbit hole. And let's just say that you came to the table, we're talking about looking at some homes, and you brought this pre-approval letter. Now, Danielle's a great lender, so I'm not going to we're just using this as an example. But let's just say you were working with Danielle, and I want to kind of have you work with another lender that I trust. So we're going to kind of role play how that works. So you like Danielle.
Okay.
And you're how I'm going to have that communication. So
okay.
Chris, pretty excited to be working with you. We've seen some great properties. Are you pre-approved?
I am, as a matter of fact. I'm working with Danielle over at Absolute Mortgage.
Wonderful.
She's a friend of mine. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I saw that you even brought the letter with the appointment. This is the letter that she gave you. This is awesome. So, did she go over other programs with you? Are you only doing the down payment assistance, or is there other programs that might work for you?
Well, honestly, it's all I really thought I could do. Are there some other options?
Possibly. I mean, I want to make sure that you're getting not only the best deal for, working with the right loan officer, but make sure that you understand all the options that are available to you. Did you sit down with Danielle and go over your financial picture and kind of lay out with documentation for her what you're trying to accomplish here?
As a matter of fact, I did. We sat down briefly over coffee, and I filled out the 1003 or the loan application. She took all my information, and she hasn't collected any documents or anything like that at this point, but she's helped me.
We're in preliminary stage. Chris, yeah. When we're in, I don't know, but I've been working since 2000, the early 2000, and, lending went through a huge shift in 2008 where there was a lot of mortgage companies that went out of business or that had some challenges. So what I want to make sure that we do for you is make sure that you also get a second opinion on your loan. So if you're not, I think it's awesome that you've already started with Danielle. Let's continue with that. But would you be okay if I put you in touch with somebody else as well, just to get a second opinion?
Well, the question that I have for you, Rochelle, I don't know if you can answer this, is it going to affect my credit if I run it a second application? That's my only concern. No. I like the idea of having another option, but if it's going to impact my credit, then I'd probably prefer not doing that.
Right. No, that it won't affect your credit. As long as you don't go and shop with 5 or 6 or 10 different, loan companies or banks, I highly recommend we get, at least 2 opinions on your purchase. When you're getting yourself when we're looking for a home, we're also looking for a mortgage. You don't have cash to put down, and 95% of the people do not have cash, and they have to get financing. But there's a lot of factors that are considered when you're getting a loan, such as your interest rate, such as your closing costs. And honestly, customer service, Chris, becomes really important when we're talking about getting a mortgage throughout this process. Some people specialize in just refinance. Some people have specialty in helping home buyers, and some people don't even live in our state and think they know how a mortgage is done in Washington. Now, I know Danielle she's done some loans for our company, so she's a good resource and an advisor here locally, but it doesn't hurt to have a second opinion, and then you can make the choice as far as which lender you want to go with. Would that be something?
Well, I trust you.
Yeah.
I trust you, and so if you have somebody you suggest, I'd go have that second conversation. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. You'll have to probably collect your information. They'll probably check your credit again, right? They'll ask you for your social security number. They'll probably want to know your income and your debt. So you'll have to kind of have that conversation again. But like I said, if we can save you just $1,000 or a couple $1,000s, I think you'd say yes to getting a second opinion. Would that be fair to say? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Money talks.
Okay. Well, I'll have Sam Sentioli give you a call at Greystone Mortgage. He'll call you. In fact, I'll text him right now. Sam Sentioli. He's Sam. You know Sam, right?
Yeah. That was like my non-acting reaction.
Oh, you're
fine. Sam. Yes, I'm looking forward to meeting him. Yes.
Good. Awesome. So there was one thing that, Chris, I'm going to teach some of the new brokers. I didn't get very good at that conversation that we had right there until after a year in the business. So I'll give you kind of my trick. What I was doing, and I learned from a coach after I made these mistakes, was I'd have great conversations. You would have Absolute Mortgage. Danielle probably, for the most part, would do a good job, right? But I was not controlling the conversation. And what was happening was I was running into lenders who drop balls. I would run into lenders that would not communicate. I had clients that would cry because they'd get them pre-approved for maybe a conventional loan and then they couldn't do conventional financing. I was running into all kinds of roadblocks. And so I was not controlling the lending process as much as I could as a real estate broker. So after a year in the business, there was a lady in my office that worked with me. And I wondered why she had more sales. Why she had more, let me mute some people here. why she had more transactions than I had. And what it came down to was I'd work with, like, say, Chris in the situation like we had. I wouldn't advise getting another opinion, and then we would have trouble down the line. And so I start sending people, oh, Chris, we'll go ahead and email you some people for you to contact. And it was like I was trying to go backwards instead of forwards. And so to kind of put yourself in the coach perspective, you've got to be able to put them in touch with the lender earlier on rather than waiting until you write the contract. If you are going to shop the loan, the rate, the relationship, find out if they're loyal, how loyal they are. If they're working with a bank, there's nothing wrong with getting a second opinion from a mortgage broker or somebody, a lender or lending correspondent. They have all these different terms, but make sure that you have two opinions. I think that would be my biggest takeaway. And don't just expect the client to make those contacts. Or if I gave Chris a name and a phone number of a lender, 95% of the time, Chris is not going to call that lender. He's too nervous. He doesn't want to take the time. That's not a fun call to have about your finances. Much more fun to talk with your real estate broker than it is to talk with your lender.
Yes.
So I would make that mistake. No, that's okay. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, and I was going to say one of the things about that too is also asking permission from the client. If the lender could reach out to them, that's a great little segue that you just described. I think that, it is a little bit of an aversion that happens as far as them reaching out, especially if they have a pre-existing relationship. My experience in that area has been more like they're more than likely, if they have a pre-existing relationship, it's more of a financial institution that they've had faith in for a long period of time. Not as many people are as directly connected to a lender per se. Unless they've done transactions in the past. And so, just to have that, to deal with that objection and understand, and also the strength of the offer, remembering that right now in this climate that we're in, the strength of the offer, the reputation of the lender, their ability to close on time, those are all things that, you can offset relationship potentially by kind of building a case for using somebody that you're familiar with and knows how you like to work.
All right, let's just do that one real quick too, Chris, because I know people are wanting to hear role playing. So you're working with BECU. Let's see how you do. You're also a client, okay? And you're a Boeing guy. You've been to Boeing for many years, and I'm just picking on it just because I know how to work that objection. So let's role play that one. So Chris, we're getting close to going out and looking at some properties. Gosh, I gotta meet some people here. There we go. We're getting close to looking at
some rebels on the line.
Yeah, I know. Get a few people that jump late. So there we go. All right. So I think we got it, Chris. So we're working on getting out there to look at some properties. Before we do that, I wanted to check and see if you were able to get in touch with somebody to work on your financing. Have you had a chance to do that yet?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the whole idea, I didn't even think I was going to be able to buy a home when I sat down with my personal banker at BECU. I've been at Boeing for a long time. And so I went and saw her first and had a conversation with her and actually did a pre-approval for me. So here's my letter from BECU.
Okay, wonderful, Chris. This is excellent. I really respect that you've taken the time to go and sit down with BECU. And you said you bank with them? You also have...
Yeah, I'm employed by them, and I've had my accounts with them for as long as I can remember.
Okay, wonderful.
They do my car loans and everything.
Yeah, and they do a great job for the car loans and for the banking, and they do a fantastic job at giving you some direction. Would you be opposed to getting a second opinion on your loan?
I've had a lot of luck with BECU. What would be why would I want, what would be the reason for me to do that if I've had good luck with them in the past? Can you give me a little bit of a breakdown on that?
Sure, absolutely. So one thing I've seen with buying a home, Chris, is there's going to be, again, I've been doing this a long time, so there's going to be several checkpoints or a process where at BECU, they work differently than a traditional, like a broker or a traditional bank, where they have several different places. So you'll go from the application, you'll be talking with somebody there at BECU, then they'll change you to the processing, and you'll go into a different department, and you might get 4 or 5 different departments at BECU. Their fees right now have tended to be a bit higher than what some of the other mortgage brokers I have seen come through. So, if you're really just wanting to keep your payment with BECU, they do, service their loans for the most part. But if you don't really care about who you pay your monthly payment to, you might be able to save yourself some money on not only the closing costs, but also on the interest rate as well. I've been able to find some other alternatives to BECU. So are you opposed to is mortgage payment really important to you, or the interest rate, or who you pay your payments to?
Oh, I would say the rate would be primary, which in turn would mean how much I'm paying per month. So who I end up paying isn't so much the issue. It's just relationship and past history with them. So
would you be opposed to just having a second opinion from a ROM at Movement Mortgage? Movement Mortgage has the ability to shop the rate and get some alternative, so you wouldn't be paying your mortgage payment. Could be Chase, it could be Wells Fargo. At some point, they basically negotiate the best rate for you, and then save on your closing costs as well. So it's good to kind of compare a bank or a credit union to, say, a correspondent lender or mortgage broker. So would you like me to set that up for you, Chris, so that it makes it easy? So you have a guy that will call you and get that going?
Yeah, I would be open to doing that just to make sure I do my due diligence. I'd be open to doing that.
Okay, awesome. So that's kind of how it goes. I mean, you got to just be very light with it. Again, if you just gave them names and phone numbers, they're not going to call whoever you ask them to call. I tried that for a year. Don't try that.
That's what we've done.
Yep. And let's see here. And probably somebody had a question. There we go. The next part I want to jump into is the process. So let's go into that real quick, the loan process checklist. This process checklist is something that I created when I had a lot of people calling me about questions. Now that we're pre-approved, what can they have conversations about with their lender? How do you keep that communication going with that lender that you selected, or that your buyer has selected? Sometimes you won't get to determine who you end up doing business with, but I found that having a good checklist that you can refer to may be really helpful to keep that everybody on the same page and on the same team. So you'll want to get a copy of the pre-approval letter. In the 22A, once you get mutual acceptance, you have the ability to stop the loan. So if you're not getting on the same page with the lender in the first few days of the purchase and sale agreement, then you're missing a huge opportunity, because the first thing I do is contact that lender right away to establish that I'm working with Chris Somerville and he's going to be working with BECU. Okay, so we'll use BECU as an example. I want to find out from BECU, right when I talk with that BECU lender, what type of loan Chris is using. So I'm going to pretend now, Chris, that you're my lender. So I'm calling you. Ring a ring. Hello, this is Chris.
Hey, yeah, Rochelle. How you? Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I don't know who you are yet. Yeah, this is Chris.
Hi, Chris. It's Rochelle with Best Choice Realty. I'm calling because we have a mutual client that we're working with. His name is Chris, also Christopher, actually. And he has sent me a pre-approval letter and said that he was going to be working with you at BECU. Do you have a few minutes to talk about his pre-approval?
I do. It's nice to meet you. Yeah, thanks for calling.
So I'm just about ready to submit an offer on Christopher Somerville's purchase and sale. We're trying to get him under contract, but it's very competitive out there. And I want to understand how he's getting, what type of loan he's getting and what kind of closing costs, what options he has besides what you wrote up on the pre-approval letter. Is he only eligible for FHA, or can he do conventional financing?
Well, if he was, there's a couple of different options right now. I mean, FHA was the best because he's got that amount for the down payment right now. But he also said that it was an option if he's got somebody in his family that would gift him another 1.5% to 2% to be able to do like a 5% down conventional. But he was feeling a little bit, like that was a little bit too risky for him, and he was kind of concerned about the MI. So, but yeah, for the most part, FHA was the best program for him just based on the amount of money that he had to put down. His credit score's basically good enough to go up to conventional if he wanted to.
Perfect. That's good to hear, because you can't tell sometimes with these pre-approval letters, how they're written. The
Christopher Somerville is a solid applicant.
He's so good. Well, and he thinks that you will. He banks with BECU, so he's pretty happy that you guys will be the one that he'll be working with. Has he sat down and given you documentation? Are you going to have some difficulties getting some of those things collected from Christopher Somerville? Or has he been?
No, I think we're going to be fine. Yeah,
Okay.
he's been supplying me. I'm going to have to get some past stuff, and he did give me a current paycheck or a bank statement as well as a pay stub, and also his 2018 or his 2017 tax returns. He's just going to be getting to file his 2018s right now, so he'll be bringing those in. So the pre-approval is based on actual numbers and some documentation. He's
Okay.
really strong.
How long does it take you to run a file? You know, if I was to write up an offer this weekend for Mr. Christopher Somerville, how long will it take BECU to run through their processes? What are you guys typically looking at turn times?
We have a little bit of resource-wise, and we've got a bit of a backlog, but we should be able to get something done, I would say, in the next 2 to 3 business days,
Okay.
if I put a rush on it.
Okay, so if I was to get, how long does it take to underwrite the file?
Well, typically we're going to do everything that we have on processing side, and we won't get it to underwriting until we have a complete file. So just kind of depending on how quickly he gets me all of his documentation, and it's usually anywhere from 3 to 5 business days to get it fully underwritten.
Okay, but we're still looking at 30-day closing, right? If that's at BECU, it's
Yeah.
like 30 to 45 days. Okay.
Yeah, 30 to 45 days. Yeah. And that is one of the, at taking, now I'm not Chris the lender, I'm Chris,
Right.
just the past. That is one of the biggest questions and concerns of the credit union. They are strong financially, but they are not necessarily from a timing standpoint. They have a huge backlog, and they don't have the resources to process and underwrite. So that's one of the challenges.
So having a good understanding, and if that's a problem, is we're going into multiple offers, that I would go back to the Christopher, right, that is the buyer, and say, hey, I spoke with, BECU, and it's sounding like they're 30 to 45 days to process. Did you know that? And Christopher would say, gosh, no. ROM at Movement Mortgage can get things done in 2 weeks. We want to switch gears and go with somebody that can close quick because of our negotiation with what we're up against. So having a conversation with the lender is key. Yep.
Yeah, and I think it's really important for you as a broker to understand what the different nuances are from not necessarily lender to lender, but maybe the institutionalized lenders versus the brokers, and kind of understanding, maybe where some place might be really great at being able to do a first-time home buyer type, the old bond style loans and things like that, versus somebody that can do a really great, quick, conventional, product. So, and then just the timing of it all. And then again, it goes back to the strength of it. Because if I was a listing agent and I had all things, be the same, and I had somebody coming in with a conventional loan from a broker that I'd worked with in the past versus a credit union, I probably would suggest or kind of lean my clients to accepting the broker loan versus the credit union one, simply because of the time frames.
Yeah. The other one I'm seeing
past experience. I don't know how it is now. So.
No, it's correct. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of pre-approvals where clients are going to Quicken Loans, they're going to Rocket Mortgage, they're going to these online companies. And I think what they're not understanding is that, they might on paper think it's saving a little bit here or there, but there's been more extensions and more challenges with going with some of those online companies, that when you look at a quarter of a point, it doesn't make a difference with the hassle and the extension fees that I'm seeing come through at the end. So having those conversations at the beginning to help set expectations would be important, especially if you're using a Quicken Loans or a Rocket Mortgage or something like that. You definitely want to ask these questions right here. What are the buyer's strengths and weaknesses? Do you foresee any problems with underwriting? Have you collected all the documentation from the buyer? If not, what is still missing from the file for it to be complete? Because they might collect only some of it, and then once they get the full picture, all of a sudden that interest rate that was only a quarter point different might actually be higher. I've had that happen to a couple of my buyers who thought they were getting a great deal, and when it really came down to it, it actually was better to go with the local guy than it was to even go with Quicken Loans. So you got to understand the full picture of what they're giving you. Do you have an underwriting approval? Obviously, an underwritten approval is better than just a pre-qual or a pre-approval letter. If you have an underwritten approval, that will really go well when you start to negotiate on their behalf. What do you need from me to speed up the process? Like, how do we work together as a team member? I work really closely with my lenders throughout the process. That's trying to get them on the same team. Remember that the lender, that there's a loan denial and settlement deadlines, and that, there's things in the contract that they have to meet. And if they can't work within those contracts, then it's maybe not a good fit for you to work with that lender. So you kind of get a good feel if they understand some of the deadlines as well.
Yeah, and I think that, and one of the things that I think on that too, Rochelle, that comes to mind is the fact that you should understand how your lender works. I think that that tells you a lot about how they do business, as far as understanding how their process works, as far as what they collect, how quickly they expect that information coming back from the buyer slash borrower. And then also kind of just kind of backtracking just a little bit on that interest rate side. It's like that idea of like quantifying and understanding how to use a financial calculator is a really important thing that you could do with your clients too as well, because you can really quantify over a 30-year period of time what the difference between an 1/8%, and would you rather risk paying $20 more a month or not getting the house. Right. So it's like you can really leverage that really easily when you can quantify those dollars, because it's really not that big of an impact on a day-to-day. So
right. No,
if that makes sense.
And you guys see a lot more than the clients. I mean, the client maybe buys a home once every 10 years, right? Where you're seeing hundreds. I'm seeing about over 100, sales every single month. So I see it on a very, very big scale, and I see much more clients wishing they would have had their real estate agent more involved in the onset of the lending process. When they do a lot more, they do this a lot more. I had a lender that called me today and said one of the best choice agents didn't communicate well at the very end, and he's just trying to be on the same page. So I think this begs the call today that if you set expectations, if you understand how the lender works, it will go a lot smoother, not only for you, but also for your client. Some other bullet points before we end the call tonight is to make sure you're turning in your offer and all addenda to the lender immediately after acceptance. I hear a lot of frustration from the lender saying, this real estate broker didn't give me all of the addenda, like there's a price change or there was something that needed to be done, or an extension. All of that kind of stuff needs to be turned over to the lender immediately upon mutual acceptance, or once those are mutually agreed upon. 35Rs are not common. If the lender is asking for a 35R, that is not common. I think the only lender in my past that has asked for that was Guild Mortgage, and I'm not seeing as many come through Guild lately. So if they're asking for Form 34, that is fine. That you need to make sure you give that to them, because it affects how they run their numbers and what they put on their closing statement and their CD. Also, make sure you're connecting the lender and the title company. That should be your responsibility, but I find that the title company is having to reach out and go to the agent. Who's your lender? Who do they finally determine to go with? Would you agree, Chris, that should be the agent that connects the dots on that one? I hear a lot of.
I think it's a thoroughness that, it's like you said, it's not necessarily your responsibility, but I think if you want the best opportunity of a smooth communication and a great transaction, that doing those types of small little details are going to serve you really well. Yes, yep. Absolutely.
And then you'll follow up with the lender. You can, again, if the buyer still has not, if Christopher hasn't gone and given all of his documents, his tax returns, that should be a daily conversation. When I was buying my first house, I was very young. I was a teenager. And I remember the lady at Countrywide, she was trying to blow up my phone. Again, that was before cell phones. So she was trying to call me up at the time. And it was my real estate broker, actually, who called me and said, Rochelle, you need to get in touch with Countrywide and get them your little bank statement. You're missing the bank statement. So it was my real estate agent that really kind of championed what was missing. It actually wasn't the lender. It was the real estate agent keeping me on track with what I needed to get the lender. And in essence, that real estate broker was acting like an aggressive processor, I would think. And that's okay. With somebody like me, paperwork's not my thing. I'm running like a mile a minute. At the time I was in high school, I was very, very busy working after school. So it might be where you have to jump in and help that lender collect the documentation that's needed to get the process moving along. Once you kind of get the loan, process, like where you've gathered all the documentation, then I think a weekly follow-up with the lender is very appropriate. That's what transaction coordinators tend to do. They tend to follow up with that lender once a week to make sure things are on track. So things that you could ask them is, has the appraisal been ordered? When will the appraisal get ordered? Has it been ordered? Those questions are good questions to ask the lender. They'll be able to let you know, have you collected everything? Has the loan been put into underwriting? Was there anything on the appraisal once the appraisal's in that was called out? Something like that. You may not even see a copy of the appraisal, but you can certainly ask the lender if there was anything called out on the appraisal that warrants you to jump in. Before the loan contingency is due, you should contact the lender. And again, that's that form. On Form 22A, it's the term, I think it's 3 or 4, to make sure they're on track. Sometimes it's 30 days. So you want to stay on top of the lender every week, but are you comfortable letting the buyer's earnest money become non-refundable? That's a great question to ask, because you're getting close to that deadline. If the lender if they're not comfortable letting their earnest money become non-refundable at that time, then they're not on track. Something's not going right with the loan. What is still required for loan approval or loan completion? Have you run into any problems so far? When do you expect final loan approval? I ask that question. It's almost second nature. I have these here and I'm just like, oh, that's right. I have that one. I've asked the lender so many times when we're getting close to being, that 30 days coming up closer to closing. Say we're like 30 days in or 21 days in, we should be asking these kind of questions. What can I do to help out with the process? What can I help to get you guys, oh, I'm missing that addendum. Oh, I need to get that to you. Those kind of questions need to be handled during the transaction rather than like 2 or 3 days before closing. I see a lot of you doing these last minute things and you guys need to start doing these things a lot sooner than you have. Then you have the CD that goes out. When does the CD go out, Chris?
Well, we'd like to have the CD go out, even the estimated settlement statement, the CD out in the very beginning of the transaction as soon as possible.
But like worst case scenario, give me your worst case. A week before?
A week before. Yeah, I mean, we want to try to get it out as early as we can, depending on how quickly we can collect the documentation, get it all put together. But I would say, 5 business days before closing would be at like the absolute latest that the expectation should go out.
Yep. If it's not going out that, then you're looking at extensions, and you don't want to have extensions. It does not look good for you, for the lender, for the buyer, for the seller. It becomes the relationship becomes very strained if you get to that point. So worst case, you're looking at a week before closing that these conversations right here in the last bullet point should happen. And then you make sure that the lender have the loan documents been sent to escrow. Like a day or 2 before closing, there's nothing wrong with having a conversation with the lender. If some lenders actually have those automatic emails, it tells you when the documents have been sent to escrow. Love those lenders, but not all of them work that way. So having a good conversation with that lender, if it be BECU or Quicken Loans, a simple phone call and just saying, hey, when are the documents going to be sent to escrow? And then making sure that all of the loan costs and terms that you guys had talked about at the very beginning are accurate before closing. Some escrow companies, WFG does a great job of giving us the copy of the closing statement before the client goes in to sign. I've been able to, it's encrypted. Most of the emails are encrypted. You got to open the encrypted, right? Every title company or escrow company works that way now for the most part. So make sure you open up the encryption, look at the loan costs and the terms, make sure you do that one look before your clients go in and sign papers. And if there's something that doesn't look right, that's a phone call to escrow to make sure that gets corrected. I've caught people, they forgot to put the closing costs on. They forgot to put, there was a work order that was done and this escrow company, it's a small company in Tacoma, Chris, I'll tell you about. I mean, it was like pulling teeth. I've sent her the addendum 4 times and it didn't get put on the closing statement. Caught that before my client went in to sign. So those types of things, it makes you look like a rock star when you do those types of checkpoints with the lender and you kind of orchestrate the deal in such a way where everybody's working on the same goal. It's getting to closing with the least amount of stress as possible. Anything to add, Chris? I'm over my time, so.
No, I think that's great. I just always want to remind folks that, as a real estate broker, you typically are the tip of the spear, and you're driving and directing a lot of the business that generates opportunities for your partners in the business. And so leverage them, have expectations, have conversations, and see the folks that you work with as a partner. And, don't let anything that you can up to chance. Try to direct as much as you can.
Yep. Awesome. All right. Have a great week, you guys. Hopefully that was helpful. And if you want a copy of this, just send me an email. I'll forward it to you. Okay. Have a good one. Thanks, Chris, for helping out.
Thank you. All right, Rochelle. Thanks. Good night,
Bye.
everybody.